Next up, the CarBuyer Advisor, your first place to turn for everything automotive. Taking a stand for consumer education and dedicated to connecting you with the industry's finest automotive products, services, and advice. And now, please welcome the CarBuyer Advisor.
Old school. The good old days. These reference times where businesses competed for customers in a battle for superior service and quality. They were good days for consumers. A person's word was their word. Shaking hands on a deal was more significant than any well-written contract today. Consumers got their money's worth. Ah, yes, the good old days. Today, quite possibly a needle in a haystack to find that. And you might as well be Magellan looking for a new land without a compass to find one any longer. They do exist. It is our gift to help you identify them, get to know them, tell your friends about them, and support them. We often ponder on this show, did they stop teaching these fundamental principles in school? Is society moving at such a fast pace that we no longer have the time to be burdened with such things? Our next guest wrote the book on old school. Walk into a shop. He's the one that more than likely is going to do your paperwork. He is also the owner. He does not use a computer. It's too impersonal for him. He likes it to be more inviting for you to come in and talk cars with him, and he knows cars. He knows tires, brakes, alignments, and offers full automotive maintenance and repairs. He is more than knowledgeable about these products and services. We suggest after listening into our interview, you will know him as an expert. Please welcome John Knagenhelm, owner of Triple S Tires and Brakes and Sparks. John, thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Mitch.
Now, how long have you lived in Reno, John?
I came to Reno in 1977. I lived in Southern California prior to that, and I was being killed by the smog, so I came up and got some good air here.
Well, then the air quality here is a lot better, no doubt about that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Now, let's begin with your extensive career in the tire industry. Where did it all start for you?
Well, actually, I have an engineering background. I worked for one of the major corporations in aerospace, and in 1970, they did a big layoff, and I went for 5 months without a job, and so I decided I was going to get a job that was virtually bulletproof. I mean, people always need brakes, tires, shocks, and other parts for their cars. But I came to Reno in 1977 because of my health. Prior to that, I worked for a Firestone Tire and Rubber Company and Utah Tire and Rubber Company, and for a little while I worked for Goodyear, and so I know and learned about a lot about tires.
Well, and you mentioned you worked for some large manufacturers of tires, and that's really where your knowledge, your really extensive knowledge in tires began. So for our listeners that may not understand or know or have been in a plant, would you share what goes on in the tire manufacturing process, how deep your knowledge of how a tire is built is?
Okay, well, basically how a tire started is they use what they call a Swedish steel bead. And they have them, of course, in different sizes. And they're wound, they're probably about 12 winds around each steel bead. And then they wrap these steel beads with what the substance they call the camelback. And that's basically the inner lining of the tire in a radial tire, which would run from bead to bead. Okay, and then they take this camelback and they put it and it looks like just a plain sheet of paper when you start out, and then they put the Swedish beads in there, they wrap it, they have a machine that makes it like a donut, and then they go from there. They have the what they call the sidewall rubber, and then they go on, they put that in there, it's laminated over the top of the tire, and then they have a bead stock, which is put on, then they put the steel belts on in there. And prior to a lot of people think that their steel belts are armor plated. They're not. They're just steel belts put inside of a tire, and then they put a nylon capping pie over that, or rayon or polyester, depends on the manufacturer. And then on top of that, they run a process and they put rubber on a tire and they kind of spin it around. And the rubber goes on there about as big around as a pencil, and it goes across the tread rubber of the tire. Then they put it in a big mold, looks like a big waffle iron, and then they cook that for a time under steam, and then they pull it out, and you've got your tire.
So, I mean, I just wanted our listeners to understand, I mean, just from the basic starting fundamental core of a tire, your level of knowledge, and we're going to get into how that really translates to your knowledge of meeting a consumer's needs with these. What do the 3 S's in Triple S Tires and Brakes stand for?
It stands for safety, service, and savings.
And now you mentioned that you moved here from Southern California, and so did I. And one of the biggest reasons I did was clean air. When did you start working at Triple S, and when did you purchase it?
I started working right after I got in town. I came to town, and the company that I originally came to go work for, they couldn't get their building up in time, so they laid me off. And then I was out of job for like 2 months, and I walked into a Triple S tire store looking for a job, and they hired me pretty much on the spot, and was my previous experience. And then, so I was hired as a salesman.
What year was that, roughly?
1977.
Okay.
And then I eventually worked over, and then we opened another store on South Virginia Street, and which is closed now, but it was 1000 South Virginia Street, and I ran that store for about 13 years, and then problems happened, but I got divorced, and I don't want to go into that subject right now. But anyway, for about 4 years, I left the Reno area, and 2 years prior to coming back, I was working for Triple S down in Petaluma, and then they asked me if I would be interested in going back to Reno to run the store in Reno, and I took that position.
And then you purchased that store in what year?
In 1997.
And that's the one that's located on Glendale.
Yeah.
In Sparks. Now, we stress on every show that consumers only support businesses that are committed to our community and providing their customers the highest quality products and services fairly priced. And if you notice, if you paid attention to that statement, that the community came first. And we walked into your shop and looked on your walls, and you have actively supported our local youth for years. And I know you don't do that for publicity. You simply do that because it's a part of who you are. It's the old school. You give back. Please share some of the many organizations over the years that you've supported.
I am not really prepared for the names, but I've done the Pee Wee football. I've done some girls soccer's team, and some and one of the couple of YMCA programs that they used to have.
And I wanted our community to know that you've done this. And like you said, I kind of got you off guard on that one, but there's like a whole wall of these thank yous.
Well, actually, that was probably caused more by my wife, because she works for another company, and she came in and says, well, these people came up to me and asked me if I would sponsor their company, and I said, sure. And I said, I don't see why not. So you write the checks anyway, so it doesn't make any difference.
Well, that's the attitude. It's like, why not? Let's help these people. And
believe it or not, it's not that much, and the kids. It really makes the kids happy when they have their uniforms and they got your name of your company on their uniforms, and especially on the Pee Wee football team, they were all jazzed,
Well, exactly. It's something that they, you're giving back to them, and it's not because you're doing it to build business with these Pee Wee football players. It's just that, or Pee Wee players. It's that you're really out there supporting, good causes in our community, and it's also one of the characteristics of quality businesses. They tend to be unselfish, and our experience shows that if businesses contribute to the community and then they care for their staff, that they're more likely to also care about their customers. And when it comes to your staff, I certainly hope you care about them, because this is a family business. And I find it interesting, sometimes family businesses have a propensity to be really great businesses. I think my opinion is that it's because whole families' names in a community depends on it. Well, it's not always the case, and yours it is. We live in a small community compared to some of the bigger cities. First, share with our listeners a little bit about when your son joined the business and some of his training and expertise that adds to the Triple S Tires and Brakes.
I hope it's okay to say the name of the company he used to work for. He worked for Mill Street Tire for 13 years, and he was their brake and front end man. But also he's worked for me since he was old enough to push a broom. So you might say he's been around cars all of his life.
Well, and then you also had mentioned that he's been through some postgraduate or very
he was actually the when Porsche of North America was here, he was actually the only alignment man in the state of Nevada that was authorized to do Porsche alignments. He also does Mercedes. He also does your Ford and Chevrolet. And when we do alignments, we do just not set the toe and let it go. We set the caster, camber, and toe, providing that the alignments are they have adjustments to do the settings. Okay.
Well, and we're going to get to alignments in detail in a minute, but I want to make sure that our listeners hear some of your goals as a business, and I hope you don't mind but I'd appreciate it if you shared with our listeners your business goal.
One of the philosophies I have is that I want a customer when he leaves my shop to know that he's happy that happy that he spent his money and he got what he's paid for. Also, I only use quality merchandise. Okay, I use Raybestos brake parts. I use Moog chassis parts. I use all name brand tires, and I'm proud of using these things. Sometimes you're trying to compete with these other companies in town, and and being a little guy, being an independent mom pop shop, you just can't always have the buying structure that you need to sell tires sometimes cheaper than these other guys.
Well, and we're going to get to that part of it because I think you're right. Quality has a cost to you as an owner of a business, that you have to pay more for that quality. It costs you more, and we've had long conversations with our listeners in the past about the fact that you get what you pay for, and that some of these cut rate companies are doing that with inferior product. But earlier we covered some of your extensive history in the tire manufacturing, and we had a deep conversation earlier this week about tire compounds, tire ratings, and how you go about not just selling a tire, but matching the right tire with your customers' needs and their vehicle's needs too. So let's talk a little bit about the tire compounds.
Okay. Well, basically they're speed rated, which is anywhere from an S rated tire, which is like 113 miles an hour, and then they have an H rated, which is like 140 miles an hour. Then they have the VNW rated tires, which are up to 160, 170 mile an hour tires. And the way they do this is by having the rubber in softer compounds. They also make the compounds so that they have more adhesion to the road. And it's like a snow tire is going to be a much softer rubber compound. That's why they don't last as long versus an all-season or a high-speed tire, which is it's going to last a little longer than or a little longer than a snow tire, but it's also going to have more characteristics that you need for the performance of your vehicle. For
faster cornering and things like that.
Exactly. Okay.
But we talked about before that the softer and harder compounds, they have advantages and disadvantages, and one is not necessarily on the same model car the best choice for everybody, that a lot of it has to do with the specific driving tendencies of each consumer.
Yeah. If let's say, for instance, you have a BMW or a Porsche or something like that, you need to put a V-rated tire in that car, okay, for two reasons. One, the car is designed to have that. If you don't do it, you can be sued, and for putting an unsafe tire on, and this happens once in a while to people, and like people don't realize sometimes if you have a nail hole in a VR-rated tire, that tire just becomes a standard load tire then, okay? It can't be just, you can't drive it at 170 miles an hour.
Well, and we talked a little bit about the tire compounds and the ride quality characteristic differences and I think it makes sense a little bit that a softer compound tire, a little stickier, generally gets a little better traction, and you get a little softer ride, and you get to these higher speed tires, and the compounds are harder and the rides are firmer. And I think it really says to me a lot, John, about the knowledge that you have about even the structure of a tire, how it's built, and the different compounds, that you can take a look at somebody's car and talk to them. And this is one of the things that you shared with me, is that you communicate a lot with the consumer about their driving tendencies, their car, how they're using it, where they're using it, so that you can really match the right tire to the right vehicle and to the right customer.
Right now, and another thing there is the cost of merchandise is so pronounced on people right now. They want to get the best bang for their dollar.
And you're right. And price and tire warranties seem to have become a way for people to shop for tires these days. Yet the longest tire warranties, that we just mentioned, it can be the longer the life expectancy of the tire, the harder the rubber, and then there's some disadvantages possibly. So it's not just a price thing. It's making sure that you're getting a tire that's going to be right for you and your driving, because a person that's driving up over Mount Rose in the summer, as opposed to somebody who's just commuting from here to Carson City on the freeway, they're going to want and experience two different tire needs, and I think that's really where your expertise is so valuable for a consumer to be able to come in and get the right vehicle tire for them. Now, you also have an extensive collection of used tires too, am I right?
Yeah, we sell. I probably have 400 used tires. Now, I don't have every size for every car, but I do have a selection of. The biggest thing is hard to come by now is your 14-inch tires, because no OEM tire has 14-inch wheels on there anymore. So they're all come out with 15, 16s, or 17s, or 18-inch tires. And we've got a pretty good selection of the 16, 17, and 18 tires.
We had a conversation about noisy brakes, and I want our listeners that are listening right now, if they've ever heard a high-pitched squealing noise or they've ever had a pulsating brake pedal, to pay really close attention to what you have to say about this. This is one of the biggest parts of your expertise. Share where the noises come from, what can cause them, and how you eliminate them from happening on your brake jobs.
Okay.
And you mentioned quality parts as one of them. But
yeah, exactly. But also, what people don't realize is squealing brakes is caused by vibration. That means the two surfaces aren't having the type of connection that they need to have, adhesion to the rotor itself. So, and that can be caused by several things. One, it can be caused by the improper machining of the rotor, or it can be caused by a grain of sand from the road getting in between the pads, and so the pads can't sit properly on the rotors. And sometimes it's just people just do crummy jobs doing brakes, and we get that all the time where we got to fix other people's screw-ups.
Well, and you mentioned that the preparation of your machine is where it starts, that a grain of sand on, and I'll let you explain that.
Yeah, okay. What we do, and the first thing we do when we machine a rotor, we make sure that the surface is clean before we put our adapters on there. And we actually take it and sand them down, clean them up so there's no foreign bodies on there. We put it on the lathe, and we'll do a slow cut, and just to make sure that the rotor is going to be savable, it isn't warped too bad that it can't be turned. And then we do a cut, and we take like 200 thousandths each time we cut, and this makes it that pretty looking smooth finish that you're looking for. And the big thing a lot of rookies do when they're putting the brakes on is they will touch the surface of the rotor. That's a no-no. Okay, you've got to take and have those rotors perfectly clean to the extent that you actually have to take a paper towel and some alcohol and wipe the grease or the smudges off the rotors, because that will impregnate it on the pad, and that'll cause squealing brakes also.
And you mentioned also it's one of the reasons why you said earlier you use Ray Bestos products, that you've used other things in the past, and once you went to this brand, that you just eliminated having noises, and you refuse to allow that to go out of your shop that way.
Yeah, and another thing is there's actually some brands that are made in a company that I will not mention right now, but that I will refuse to put on cars, even if somebody would bring them in. I just say, sometimes you just got to say, no, I won't do it.
Well, quality is a standard, and that's what that looks like. John Knogenhelm, owner of Triple S Tires and Sparks. How do they get a hold of you?
You can call me at 359-6470.
And you're located at?
1505 Glendale Avenue, just about a quarter mile from Rock and Glendale.
Thanks for joining us. We hope to have you back soon, and thanks for accepting our invitation to be here today.
I appreciate it, Mitch. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.